Reading today is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14, verse 1, and then moving on to verse 7 through 14. Hear these words. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisees to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, give this person your place. And then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
I put a title to this sermon as Family Dinner. And I was thinking about Jesus being gathered with the scribes, the Pharisees, the group of people that we get together for dinner with one another. This is basically Sunday dinner, what's happening in our scripture. It's the Sabbath day, so they've been in worship in the synagogue. And afterward, maybe into the evening, I don't know if it's afternoon or evening, but they've gathered together and they're having dinner with one another. The disciples are there with Jesus. Jesus is invited in the home of one of these leaders, and on the Sabbath, this part we jumped over, there was a person who came in who was in need of healing, and everybody was kind of looking, what was Jesus going to do? And he could kind of tell, and, he said, well, wouldn't any of you, give help to your child on the Sabbath, even if they needed it, or if they needed it? And so he heals this person, and then he begins to teach them and to tell them about when you go to a banquet, what you're supposed to do. It's etiquette is basically what he's teaching them. And that's one of the things we probably learned at family dinners, isn't it? About the proper thing to do. I'm not necessarily what fork to use and all that kind of thing. Not all family dinners are that way. Probably most of them are not. But when family gathers together for a meal, and we live in a different kind of world. We're not all able to gather together for such a family meal, but we do it in different ways today. I was thinking one of the things that we were able to do this week is to say goodbye to Don Shank, close member of our church, and after all those years of life and being able to share with him. And one of the family traditions they had was the last Sunday of the month for the family to gather together for a meal on that Sunday. We do that. We find ways to pull ourselves together as a family. I got a call Monday night. It's kind of late. It's almost 9 o'clock, and my cell phone rang. That kind of feeling you get when you get a late night phone call. And it was a member of the Prague Church, so that bothered me even more. I mean, if they're going to call me and they're going to call late at night, it must be something bad has happened. It was Jerry Opila. He's head of the trustees at the church, and he said, I worked my whole life, and then I retired, and now I went to work for Scott, because we did so many projects together in the 4 years we were there at the church. And I told him, I said, no, Jerry, you didn't go to work for me. You went to work for the Lord. And he kind of laughed at that, and then I reminded him, Moses, the first part of Moses' life, he worked for himself. The second part of Moses' life, he worked for his family. And then the third part of his life, he lived and worked for the Lord. And that in his retirement, Jerry was finding a way to work for the Lord. He's putting all those skills to work at the church. He didn't get to put them to rest after that, but he still was chair of the trustees, and they've had a change of pastorate at that church. And so the pastor who followed me was cleaning out, loading everything up, and he found a box that Angie and I had left there in the attic. And I don't know if you remember these days, that for my age group, this was a pretty typical experience, that we would have, to go to the roller skating rink, we would have a box that you would carry your skates in. So it was a skate box, and I guess I'd outgrown the skates had gone elsewhere, but I'd begin to put things from my childhood and high school away into the skate box, and it was collected in this box that was there. So Jerry said that Seabrook Griffin was going to be coming to town, and Seabrook was going to come, and he said, "You know where he eats on Friday, so that you could meet him there." And Seabrook lives in Prague, good friend from there, but his mama lives here. So every Friday he comes to go take his mom to lunch. And I happen to know this. And so, if you will, got invited to come in to the family dinner on Friday. And Jenny came, and Angie and I got in there a little early, and they came walking in. And Seabrook, if some of you may remember him from his childhood growing up here, but Seabrook is just a character. He's one of the most fun people you can be around. But so he comes in carrying this old case, and he has a chain wrapped around his wrist and chained to it, like he's the security guy bringing this great valuable thing to bring to me. And so we got to sit down and we got to enjoy family dinner together on Friday. I think it's important that we have such times where we sit down with one another, we share a meal. There's something that is good about that kind of activity. And we live in a world where it's not always going to look the same way. Although I suspect, I hadn't gotten a phone call from my mom about it, because she knows how rough it is on Sunday afternoon for me to be able to get there. But most weeks she'll put a pork roast and a beef roast in to cook together. And you know how that smells when you come home, whenever roast has been in all Sunday morning and you come home and you just open the door and you can smell the aroma and how good that is. And, we need to have times where we gather together that way as family, as community, to share with one another. And Jesus uses this occasion to do some teaching about how we are to live with one another, about how we are. I don't know if you've had the experience to go to a dinner, and you go, and it's not one of those kind of dinners, but maybe an event where it's a fundraiser or something else is going on, and you go and you get there, and it's a big banquet, and you really don't see anybody you feel a little out of place, and maybe you think, should I really even be here? And would anyone really care if I was not here? We have those occasions, dinners that we go to. But there's a place where we can go where we are always known and not live in such anonymity. We like anonymity, but we need a place to be known as well. A place where folks know our life and know a bit of who we are. I grew up in Oklahoma City. It's pretty different than Chickasha, far more different than Prague. When you live in a small town like that, everybody knows who you are. In the city, when I'd pull out of my driveway, I was totally anonymous. I mean, as soon as I got out of maybe the neighborhood, and no one would recognize who I am. But in a town this size, you drive down the road, you recognize cars, you recognize and see people. Even in a smaller town, much more so. I remember the story. A friend was serving a church over in the eastern part of the state, small town. People gathered together for breakfast at the local donut place and coffee, and they'd talk and everything. And there's a fella there who he'd been driving a long time. He's getting up in his 90s, and his truck that he drove was pretty beat up. I mean, rough. It was an old farm truck, but he would drive it, everywhere he went. And in fact, he'd had so many accidents with it, the bumper no longer was on it. And in place of the regular bumper, he had put a railroad tie on. And so the railroad tie was on the front of the truck, and that would be, his bumper. And he was telling everybody he was going to go buy a new truck. The town sheriff was there, and he says to him, "I can't let you buy a new truck." He said, "I'm sorry, but you just can't have a new truck." And he says, "Well, how can you stop me from getting a new truck?" He says, "Well, I can't stop you from getting a new truck, but I will stop you from driving. Because right now, everybody knows your car, and they know to stay far away. But if you get a new truck, it's going to be dangerous for everybody in town." And, that kind of town where everybody knows you. I think I was gone. Ashley was preaching back earlier this year, and she talked about everybody needing a third place. You have home, you have work, and then there's a third place that you need to have in your life where you belong and where everybody knows who you are. Like that old Cheers TV show and song, a place where everybody knows your name. We need that kind of place. And for us, that's the church. It's the church. We have our family, we have our home, we have work, and then we need that third place to be someone different, for someone to see us for who we truly are. That's our place here when we come to worship, when we come to this family dinner with one another. We are known as a child of God. And we're known for the unique person that we are and the unique gifts that we bring to our life. And everybody knows our name. Well, we hope, It takes some work. If you have a community, a church of 50 to 60 people, you can know everybody's name. When you get to a church a little larger, like ours, around 200 most Sundays, it's harder to know everybody's name. It takes work to do it. But we know each other's story in some way, and we build those kind of relationships. We need a place to belong, to be able to share our life with each other. And so we remember that it's here that we are apart. Do you remember when you went to elementary school, a teacher would call roll? My first grade teacher did not like us to say here. She wanted us to say present. So we would say present. It's not that we were just here, but we needed to be present. I didn't understand that when I was in the first grade. I think that she meant something more. I just thought she was particular about a word. She just wanted us to say present. When we come to worship, we don't want to just be here. Sometimes we come and we're just here, right? I mean, you get up, you do this, it's what we do. We go to church, we're just here. But the truth is, we need to wake up and be present to the moment. Because there's something more that's happening when we are here. If we are truly present, God is present to us. We get to sit down at the dinner table with all our friends and distant cousins, and we sit with one another, and God is present with us and is able to minister to who we are. We need to be present with how we are with one another. There's something important about that. Jesus tells us the story about a person who threw a great banquet. important occasion. And all the friends of this person, one by one, gave their excuses as to why they couldn't come. You know, I've got this going on. I'm selling cattle. I've got all these things, all these reasons why they couldn't come. And I suspect, I don't know if you've ever thrown a party and then not had people show up. But to do so can be pretty disappointing. To expect people to be there and then them not be there. It says he got a little angry. I suspect it was out of disappointment because we want to be able to share all those parts of ourselves with others. Disappointment is what, it's like just like heartache, heartbreak, that someone, they didn't come. And I recently heard a study that around 85% of us have not had someone over for dinner at our house in the last 3 or 4 years. Can you think through that? Have you had an occasion, not for your family, but to bring other people into your home and share a meal with them? When's the last time you did that? Jesus says that when you throw a party, when you have a dinner, don't just invite your friends and your family who can pay you back by inviting you to a dinner the next week at their house. But invite those that won't ever be invited. The poor, the lame, those that are uninvited, maybe don't fit in as easily. They're the ones who also need it. And in fact, when we do so, and if they're not able to pay us back, it's like setting aside a reward in heaven. Because God will make sure that we are paid back. When we choose to be inclusive in how we invite people to the table, folks who would never get an invitation otherwise. Those are some of the most joyous occasions. It says about that occasion that whenever the other people didn't show up, that the owner, the party thrower, said, go gather up the people in the streets and the byways and bring them in. Anybody who can come, good or bad, just bring them in and let's fill the banquet up. This party thrower is interested in connecting with any and everybody and bringing them into the party. In fact, he's kind of harsh about those who didn't come. They'll be thrown out and not allowed to come to the big party that's to come. They're going to miss the big one. You know, we sometimes, I can be guilty of it, am so drawn to the stories of grace. I wish Jesus, in that occasion, would have told a story like the prodigal son, you know. The father's still waiting for the son to return. But he kind of says, you know, there are some things that are so important, if you let go of them, you might not be able to take hold of it again. Some gifts are given, and if you don't appreciate it, you might not get another shot at it. He throws the party, and those who miss it have missed out. And in fact, may be marked off of the invitation list or the Christmas card list, you know, because they didn't respond. That's harsh. I see a compassionate God, a compassionate Jesus, and yet he wants to remind us sometimes that we have something really special we shouldn't ever trivialize or take for granted. Hold on to it. This is important stuff. You don't want to let go of it too easily because you don't want to miss the big party that is to come. I heard about a church a few years ago. They decided that the members of the church had gotten too lax in what membership in church meant. And so they informed the whole congregation, you are no longer members of the church. They In essence, they kicked everybody out on 1 week. And they said, but if you'd like to be a part of the church again, you can do so. And here are the expectations. And then they laid them out. What would be the expectations, the minimum expectations we would have for people to be a part of the congregation? Would we expect them to be in worship once a month? Would we expect them to be in worship every week? We expect them to see that discipleship is something that's a call to growth and living in all our life, and not just a box that we check that we are a part of a church, but that we are disciples following Jesus, and that we're going to try to be growing in our faith, that we'd be a part of Sunday school in order to learn, and not just to learn for ourselves, but to help others to learn in faith. That we would do, what would that criteria look like if we were to do it? I don't know many churches that have ever made that decision, but I know a lot that feel tempted to do so from time to time. How is it we live and we practice our faith? One of the things that's interesting is, as a pastor, to look out and to see the congregation gathered on Sunday morning. And I know I tell you this, the thing I love to do is to stand over here in the corner and just to watch as people come in and to see them and to think about what's going on in their lives and to watch how they interact with each other and to think about how it is that God might be working in their life and what it is they need to hear today in their life and in their journey. On Sundays when, we're not all other places, and the place begins to fill up, there's an extra energy that's there. What it is that every one of us brings energy to worship. Every one of us brings something to share and to contribute. And when we bring that energy, the gift of ourselves, to worship, and we offer ourselves in praise to God, it's like God multiplies it. And God multiplies the power of what it is to be in community with each other. And you make a contribution to that. When you're not here, someone's not making that contribution to the community and the larger group. It's like whenever, if you have 2 kids in Sunday school, you could do some things. But if you have 8 kids in Sunday school, there's so much more that you can do whenever that's the case. In worship, it's the same way in terms of how we contribute and we bring energy and life to a church. It's funny to see, the very first church I had, Penn Avenue, was the 13th and North Penn in Oklahoma City, right over by OCU. And right over there, the congregation, I bet on Sunday mornings, our average age was well into the 70s. So if it rained on Sunday morning, our attendance went down. We'd have normally 70 people or so, but if it rained, we might have 40. Next church I went to, a lot younger congregation, was in Moore, 104th and South Santa Fe at New Life. And in that church, a lot younger congregation. On Sunday morning, if it rained, attendance went up. I couldn't figure it out. I mean, I was taught from watching, for 4 years, it rains, attendance goes down. Took me a long time, longer than it should have, really, to realize that for these young people, it meant that the ball game was canceled, the picnic or the celebration or whatever it is the other plans they had just got rained out, and so now they could come to worship. It was like, if I get no better invitation, then I'll come. God's throwing this party, and He invites us all, and it's a celebration. It's one filled with grace and love and warm feelings, all those good things. Do we want to put it at the top of our list of things to do? Or do we put it, oh, well, if after the watermelon festival and all those kind of things, then maybe, we'll come. I think worship is one of those places that we need to see as celebration, that we're coming to a great party, and to be committed to being present with one another. When we are able to do so, I think as a church, it gives us energy. I'm so excited about Epworth, and I think God's calling us to do lots of things, and there are people that God's yet to bring. And if you haven't made plans for Friday night, come on out to Shannon Springs and just enjoy the movie with the rest of us. There'll be from anywhere from 400 to 1,000 people there, depending on how the weather goes and if we've gotten enough publicity out. It'll be a blast to come watch the movie and to watch the kids. I mean, that's the fun thing, is to watch the kids watching the movie. I get a big kick out of that. It'll be 8 o'clock at night, so it'll be 10:30 before you get home. If you feel like you can't drive at night, call me. We'll find a way to get you there. But it'll be fun. It'll be a blast. It'll be like a party. And while we won't be talking about church and all that kind of stuff, it'll be a celebration that the great party thrower is throwing and invites you to. And next Sunday as well. You don't want to miss out, because God has exciting things for us in our faith, and we want to be a part of it. Amen.